Hey y'all, I'm back with a live stream. I gotta set up this YouTube real quick, so bear with me. Let me make sure the chat is on. All right, let me save that. Let me update the picture. All right, hopefully I can see the chat. Let me refresh my screen. Okay, look like the chat is on. Let me see who's in here. We got 16 people in here so far. Hey, Rhythm and Sway. Hey, Actor 23. I'm doing well. Hope you're doing well. Hey, Abu. Hey, Catch Marley. Hey, Blazing Black Dolphin. Hey, Dre. What's up, Isaac? Hey, Jane. Hey, Adora. Who else we got up in here? So you said you sound so clear, love the audio. Well, thank you. That's good to know because sometimes I'd be struggling with the audio. Hey, Dr. Ken. Hey, Tyrell. Tyrell, I'm gonna be sending you your reading soon. Hey, Ellie. All right, the room is filling up fast. I hope everybody is enjoying their Aquarius season. Happy post Valentine's Day. I've been doing well, Isaac. Hope you've been doing well too. I'm getting over a cold. So if my voice sounds a little hoarse, that's why. I mean, actually the cold is over, but you know how you got that aftermath crap with the you still coughing and stuff. So if I cough a few times, forgive me. And I rarely get cold. So when I got this cold in January, it was like the last week of January, man, I was pissed because I worked my hardest to avoid getting colds. But I was on a plane and I think somebody on the plane had something. And then when I got back home, had a headache, fever, I'm all runny nose and shit. I was pissed. Oh, thank you, actor. So we're not going to tarry too long tonight because I got a lot to do. So I won't be on here too long. So we are going to cut right to the chase. As you can see with the title, this is about Shanda Vander Ark. So some of you might be familiar with this story. I learned about this story, I think, back in maybe November when the trial was going on. And yeah, I was just like, wow, that shit's crazy. Hey, the Sacred Owl, how you doing? Who is out there making all that noise, sounding like a donkey? Uh-oh, is somebody about to fight? Hold on, I gotta look out my window. Hold on, I sound like somebody about to fight, y'all. I don't even live in the hood. What the fuck? They just walked past my window. I hope they didn't see me looking. But what's that all about? Some dude's yelling. Okay, I'm like, damn. This where I live, it is seem like it's starting to go a little downhill. So I'll be glad to move out of this area. All right, where was I at? Okay. So while people are coming into the room, I'm going to read a little bit about this woman, Shanda Vander Ark. So has anybody ever heard of this Shanda Vander Ark? You know I'm nosy wellness. I can't help it. I like a little drama from time to time. And especially, I'm like, if it's happening outside of my window, I'm going to check. I got to make sure me and mine is safe. I don't want to have to go into my cabinet and get that heat. Oh, thank you, Sacred Owl. We got, I think, what are you, the only diggable plant in the house? Yo, you the only diggable planet up in the house. I'm pretty sure a lot of y'all didn't get my notification. It wasn't like the classic YouTube notification, but I did post a post in the community tab. But that's all right. A lot of y'all could catch the replay. But did anybody celebrate Valentine's Day yesterday? Did anybody get anything nice? Any gifts, any flowers, candy, jewelry? I know some of y'all be getting spoiled on Valentine's Day. But one thing I'll say is it's interesting that Valentine's Day falls on the 14th because the 14th really isn't conducive to love and romance. Mac Major, you said nope. So you didn't do anything for Valentine's Day. I didn't celebrate Valentine's Day either. I mean, I got my daughter a rose and some face mask stuff, and that was my Valentine's Day gift giving. And then my daughter got me a little candy and a she got me a candy rose. Ellie said my boyfriend gave me some money and that's it. He was working. Hey, that's enough. I'm like, shoot, money is one of the best gifts to get. I never have a problem with getting money. So actor, you did not either. Dr. Ken said I had a Popeyes as a cheap meal. I was craving it. Well, yeah, shoot, it's Valentine's Day. Celebrate. But like I was saying, the 14th really isn't conducive to love. But if you understand the myth of Valentine, didn't it have to deal with some wolf or something like that? Let me look it up real quick. See, I'm about to cough. Excuse me. Man, I got to get the rest of this crap out of my system. Let me put in Valentine's Day origin. I swear it has to do with like some wolf chasing women down and trying to assault them and stuff. Okay, so it says, and it's interesting that Valentine's Day takes place during Aquarius season, which is the opposite of love. Now, while the European folk traditions connected with St. Valentine and St. Valentine's Day have become marginalized by modern customs connecting the day with romantic love, there are still some connections with the advent of spring. While the custom of sending cards, flowers, chocolates, and other gifts originated in the UK, Valentine's Day still remains connected with various regional customs in England. In Norfolk, a character named Jack Valentine knocks on the rear door of houses, leaving sweets and presents for children. That sounds a little suspect. Although he was leaving treats, many children were scared of this mystical person, and justifiably so. If some stranger is coming to your back door, leaving candy, you know what that sounds like. Now, in Slovenia, Saint Valentine or Zdraviko was one of the saints of spring, the saint of good health, and the patron of beekeepers and pilgrims. A proverb that says Saint Valentine brings the keys of roots. Plants and flowers start to grow on this day. It has been celebrated as the day when the first work in the vineyards and the fields commences. It is also said that the birds propose to each other or marry on that day. Another proverb of Valentine, as in some places, St. Valentine marks the beginning of spring, even though we're dealing with wintertime. So the Day of Love was originally designated for March 12th, but 12 is not really good either. So, okay, here's the wolf part. So, possible ancient origins. The feast of St. Valentine originated in Christendom and has been marked by the Western Church of Christendom in honor of one of the Christian martyrs named Valentine, as recorded in the 8th century Gelasian Sacramentary. In ancient Rome, Lupercalia was observed between February 13th to the 15th on behalf of Pan and Juno, pagan gods of love, marriage, and fertility. It was a rite connected to purification and health, and had only slight connection to fertility as part of health, and none to love, which makes sense because, like I was saying, 14th ain't really a number that's conducive to love. The celebration of St. Valentine is not known to have had any romantic connections or connotations until Chaucer's poetry about Valentine's Day in the 14th century, some 700 years after celebration of Lupercalia. Now, that Lupercalia, that's dealing with like men turning into werewolves. That's what I believe. I'm trying to find it in here. But yeah, basically, originally it was not about love. And again, it makes sense because Valentine's Day takes place on the 14th. And 14 can deal with natural disasters and storms and stuff, Babezilla. All right, so let's get into this story. Let me share my screen. Oh, let me pull up. Oh, did anybody watch the Super Bowl? I believe the Super Bowl is fixed. And I'm not surprised that the Kansas City Chiefs won because that news story about the 3 Kansas City Chief fans that died outside had me like really looking at the situation like, yeah, are they tipping the big time gamblers off about who's going to win? So I wasn't surprised. And the funny thing is, Kansas City won by 3 points, and 3 of those Kansas City Chief fans died. I'm like, that was a tip off right there. All right, so let me share my screen because we're going to get into this story quick, fast, in a hurry. Oh, wait a minute. All right, I'm sharing my screen right now. And again, this is a video about Shanda Vander Ark. And I'm about to read her story. Shanda Vander Ark, a case of severe neglect and torture of a child. Now, this is from the New York Post. Killer mom who intentionally and systematically tortured disabled 15-year-old son to death gets life in prison. The Michigan mother who starved her disabled teenager to death was sentenced Tuesday to life in prison without the possibility of parole, with a judge ripping into her for the systemic torture of the young boy. Shanda Vander Ark, 44, was found guilty last month in the death of 15-year-old Timothy Ferguson, who weighed just 69 pounds when he was found dead in July 2022 in the glorified closet she forced him to sleep in, wrapped only in tarp. I've been trying now for this entire case to wrap my mind around how somebody could do something so horrific, not only to another human being, but to their own child, Judge Matthew Casel said. You intentionally and systematically tortured this child. Let's call it what it is. It's torture. You tortured this child. This wasn't punishment. You weren't trying to curb his behavior. You tortured him. Vander Ark was also sentenced to an additional 50 to 100 years in prison for first-degree child abuse, a punishment that exceeded sentencing guidelines, but that Casel said was justified by Timothy's long-term suffering. The teen died from malnourishment and hypothermia after suffering months of cruel abuse at his mother's hands, as well as his older brother, Paul Ferguson, who claims he was operating under Vander Ark's instruction. Timothy, who had some mental disabilities, was being homeschooled, was routinely fed hot sauce, restrained with shackles and zip ties, and deprived of sleep. Vander Ark also instructed 20-year-old Paul Ferguson, who faces one count of first-degree child abuse for his alleged role in the crime, to taunt his younger brother with frozen pizza rolls and to pour hot sauce on his siblings' genitals. Ice baths were one of the teenager's regular abuses. Paul Ferguson testified that he left Timothy in a freezing tub for 4 hours just before the boy's death. Paul Ferguson said he did so only because Van Ark said to. Pictures of Timothy Ferguson's lifeless body shown in court revealed bruises and his ribs nearly visible through his skin, the sight of which sent Vander Ark into a vomiting fit during her final testimony on the stand. Casel, saying he didn't want to take away Timothy's dignity, displayed a photo of the smiling boy atop the bench. "I'm choosing to remember him like that. And you can't even look at him," Casel said, addressing Vander Ark. "That's how he was, a beautiful child with a lot of life in his eyes. That's who your son was, and you took that from him. We know who you are. That's the way that I'm going to honor him. You don't win because justice, thank God in this case, prevailed." The murderous mother, wearing orange jail togs and her hair in two thin braids, declined to speak when given the chance, instead shaking her head to indicate no. Vander Ark's attorney, Fred Johnson, said his client brought Timothy into her home while working as a single mother who was putting herself through school and the difficulties that came with it. "This is a survivor, a person who pulled herself up by her bootstraps," Johnson said. "We're not looking at evil, we're looking at sick." Paul Ferguson pleaded guilty to first-degree child abuse in December and is expected to be sentenced in late February. So that is the background story. So the prosecutor did not show the photo. He did show one photo where Timothy was looking very thin, but he didn't show like a bunch of photos out of respect for Timothy to maintain a certain level of dignity, because his mother sure ripped most of the dignity away from him. So again, this is Shanda Vander Ark. This video has been sponsored by Celeste. Thank you, Celeste, for sponsoring this video. And Celeste wants to know what makes her so evil and heartless. So I'll touch on some of the aspects in her chart that makes her so. You also said, "I think her husband or current partner became disabled. Is there a disability theme in her chart?" Yes, there is. You said, "I found her son's birthday, August 6, 2006, and he passed on July 6, 2022. He was 15 years old." And you said it looks like she also manipulated the other son to participate in the evil behavior. So the other son, named Paul, he was the 20-year-old that basically was contributing to the neglect and the torture. So, Celeste, you provided a birthday for Shanda, and I was going online looking for her birthday, and I found that I had the hardest time finding a birthday, but I found two separate birthdays, and both of them were September of 1979. I think the birthday you sent me was September 25th, 1979. So I'm looking for confirmation of her birthday through like trying to find court records and arrest records and stuff like that. I couldn't find anything with her birth date to confirm that, because these sites where her birthday was listed, they are questionable. So I was watching this video right here dealing with Shanda Vander Ark when the police were first called once she discovered that Timothy was dead. So thankfully, in this video, the cop asked Shanda what her birthday is. So she provides her birthday in this video. So I'm going to play that snippet right here, because I'm like, I basically would believe the horse's mouth over what it's saying on the internet on some questionable website. This right here, this is Paul. This is when the detective is questioning Paul. But let me bring it back to where he asked her what her birth date is.
Oh, God. Oh, I should have made a plea. I should have done something. Can they really hide that from you like that?
They can hide a lot of things from you. What's your date of birth, ma'am?
3/13 of 79.
What's your phone number?
I'm sorry. Here you go.
Okay, so you heard that she said 3/13 of 79, March 13th, 79. So I'm going with that. So, and then when I pulled that chart, basically it matched up with this story. So we're going with the birth date that she provided in this video, March 13th, 1979. So unfortunately, I don't have her time of birth. She was fake crying, y'all. So unfortunately, I don't have her time of birth, but we can glean a lot of information just off of the signs and the aspects and all that. All right, so here she is right here on the stand. Again, she's fake crying. She's acting like she's about to vomit. A lot of people are saying that they think that her whole vomiting spell was fake. I saw the video where she's vomiting, quote unquote vomiting, and it did look like she was faking. And all that fake crying, that is very easy for a dark side of Pisces to do. Like dark side of Pisces, they can really play the role of the victim to the hilt. And that's exactly what she did or tried to do. So she has Sun conjunct South Node in Pisces. That alone says so much. So, number one, with the Sun representing children, this could play out as a special needs child. Now, Celeste, you asked, was there any signs of disability in her chart? So, this alone can show a disability. It can show a disability involving a child of hers, but even a husband, because the Sun rules husbands as well. So that can be a husband that's sick, a husband that's incapacitated, a husband that has a disability, and also, like I said, a special needs child. The theme of neglecting a child is shown through this conjunction as well. And because we're talking about the South Node, we're talking about this is some karmic induced energy right here. This is energy that she's bringing over from a past life. So in a past life, she could have been extremely neglectful. She could have neglected a child in a past life. So she could just be repeating the same act in this current lifetime. So constantly having a child on camera. So Pisces rules cameras. So basically she had the house set up where there was cameras everywhere so that she could watch Timothy. So that is pointing to that conjunction as well. Lies, deception. And with the Sun being conjoined to the South Node, it's very easy for her to lie. It's very easy for her to try to deceive others. It just comes naturally, second nature. Also, Pisces is a sign that will shift blame onto others. So this is showing where she was shifting blame onto Timothy. Timothy is the son that died at her hand. And one of the ways she shifted blame, and this was so ridiculous, she basically said that Timothy was on a food strike. And that's why he was so skinny. That's why he wasn't eating. So again, shifting blame. Also isolating a child. She kept Timothy isolated from the outside world and even isolated from his siblings for the most part, keeping him in that closet. Pisces is a sign of isolation. Now, her oldest son, Paul, basically had no will of his own when he's dealing with Shanda. So, little backstory on this whole situation, because I spent a lot of time researching this story and reading like as much as I could about this story and watching videos and stuff. So basically the backstory is Shanda was for the most part, she wasn't in her children's life like that. In the early part of their life, yeah. But then at a certain point, she gave up custody of her children. But it was recommended that she should only have supervised visitation or supervised custody because she had gotten into trouble with the kids before. So she had a history of abuse and neglect towards a child or more than one child already. So the courts, again, they recommended that she only be given supervised visitation with the children. And then she decided to give up her parental rights and basically move far away from the children. But then at one point, the children were living with their father. So at one point, the father couldn't handle Timothy anymore. But first, it started with Paul. So first, Paul went to live with Shanda. And I'm not sure of the circumstances that led to Paul living with Shanda, but maybe he wasn't getting along with his dad. He in the court and also in the investigation, Paul does talk about how, he had problems with his dad and his dad was abusive and his dad was mean and all this type of stuff. So that could be why Paul ended up moving with Shanda, even though Shanda didn't have custody of them anymore. And then I think it was like a year later or maybe 2 years later, Timothy goes to live with Shanda because Timothy's father told Shanda that he could no longer deal with Timothy anymore because Timothy was wild. He was, destructive. He wasn't listening to his father and stuff. So Shanda agreed to allow Timothy to come live with her. So that's the backstory. So this Sun conjunct South Node in Pisces is also representing Paul and how Paul basically has no will of his own. And basically that conjunction is representing a merging effect that took place between Paul and Shanda, where Paul becomes like a zombie and where it's like he's suffering from Stockholm syndrome. He even mentioned the term Stockholm syndrome as to why he was just going along with everything his mother said when it came to abusing Timothy. And this conjunction is basically showing that. Long-term imprisonment. So Pisces rules imprisonment. And when you have your Sun conjoined to the South Node, there's a high chance you're going to be doing a lot of time. So this is also showing where she doesn't have much free will at some point. Living in a fishbowl existence. So this is one of the problems with dark-sided Pisces. Well, dark-sided Pisces is a problem in and of itself, but one of the main problems that comes with dark-sided Pisces and the reason why they can do certain things that other people would look at with shock and horror is because they can live in a fishbowl existence where whatever craziness they can come up with, they can basically justify and be fine and not have any conscience about it and just be totally numb to whatever is not conducive to their well-being. So case in point, her son is suffering, but the whole suffering, or even let's pull it back to just her son being disabled. With her living in that fishbowl existence, it's like all of that didn't matter. Oh, you're infringing upon my time. That's more so how she's looking at it. So here's the mug shots of Shanda and her son Paul. Just looking at Paul, you can tell that something's not right with him. Like he looks dead behind the eyes. He also looks like he's dealing with a lot of pent up anger and aggression. And at the same time, it looks like he has this defeatist type of mindset, or you could say a mindset of futility. Like it doesn't matter because he doesn't matter. He probably has that anti-natalist type of a viewpoint as well. I've been doing a lot of research on the anti-natalist movement. It's kind of interesting, and that's very apropos to Aquarius season, but I don't want to go off on a tangent. But anyway, he just seems like somebody that really doesn't like people, and he doesn't like life, and he doesn't like himself, and he doesn't like his mother either. It's more so codependency between him and his mother. And because he has such abandonment issues dealing with his mother, I believe he was operating in fear of displeasuring his mother, and he was afraid that she was going to send him back to his father. Also, Mars is conjoined to that Pisces South Node, which makes it even worse in terms of the way she operates, like in that fishbowl existence, and where she could totally believe her own lie. So she has Sun and South Node in Pisces squaring Neptune and Sagittarius. So this is representing the fake crying that she was doing. Also, her feigning ignorance over her child's weak condition and vulnerable state, being numb to a child's suffering. Now, this same square is like somebody that's on drugs all the time, right? It's like a hardcore alcoholic, a hardcore drug addict. If you got a parent that is a hardcore alcoholic or a hardcore drug addict, a lot of times their children will be neglected in the process. Now, Shanda wasn't addicted to drugs or alcohol, but she was addicted to the law, like because she was in law school. And she even scored high on the bar exam and all that stuff. But she was totally immersed in that whole world of law. So when Timothy came into her life, it was like there was no room for him. So might as well just push him into a closet, not even feed him much, and just act like he doesn't exist. So when you got Sun Square Neptune, it's like in some cases, the person with this square, if they have children, they could treat their children like they don't even exist. Total neglect of a child. So severe neglect of a child that comes or that can come with this square. Also, she claimed that both of her sons, Paul and Timothy, when they came to live with her, that they were over drugged. Yeah, she got a law degree. Isn't that ironic? So she claims that both of her sons were over drugged. So she could be right about that. But that basically is represented by this square. And this square can cause someone to regret having children. So I'm sure she regretted having the children, especially because the relationship with their father didn't work out. It says here, a January 2012 exit order from Oklahoma Juvenile Court signed by then Shanda Ferguson and Eric Ferguson reveals she waived custody rights voluntarily prior to a former decision to have them terminated. So she decided to bow out gracefully, I guess you could say, when it came to the custody of her children. But this square is showing she really didn't want her children anyway. Keeping a child locked up, cuffed to the wall. So she had actually bought cuffs and she basically had him locked up at times, Timothy. Also claims she would look the other way when it came to bathing Timothy. You're going to see this Pisces theme come up a lot in this video, not just with Shanda, but also with Timothy and Paul, because I'll be getting into their charts as well. And in this case, Pisces rules neglect and also fear, also, paranoia, addictions, but Pisces also rules water. It's one of the water signs, and Pisces is representing the baths. So she claims she would look the other way when it came to bathing Timothy. Also, her yearning for freedom to pursue a career in law caused her to neglect Timothy. So like I said, she wasn't on drugs or alcohol, but that Neptune and Sagittarius is representing her becoming fully immersed in the whole field of law. And again, her looking at Timothy as just being in the way, as being a burden to her pursuit of a law degree and her becoming successful as a lawyer. At the time, she was working as a law clerk. Being incarcerated due to neglect of a child. And also this represents the judge shaming her. So the judge is being represented by Neptune and Sagittarius in that case. So here's these squares right here that I'm talking about. Sun and South Node squaring Neptune. Now let's talk about her sun and south node in Pisces opposing her north node and moon in Virgo. That's some heavy energy to be dealing with. And with that moon representing motherhood, this is basically telling you a lot. So, lacking emotional attachment to children, especially Timothy, due to his disabilities. Because the thing with Virgo expects perfection, right? Or if you can't get perfection, Virgo at least expects things to be operating as they should, including people. So with someone with the moon conjoined to the North Node in Virgo, it's like she wants her role as a mother to be regular, to be like, you know, the average mother experience. But because she has this disabled child, that's just too much for this moon and Virgo woman to handle, especially with that moon conjoined to the North Node, because this wasn't supposed to happen. See, the thing with Virgo is Virgo believes things are supposed to be operating per a prescribed plan. So if it's not, if things are broken, if things aren't right, they can have a serious problem with that. So this is her basically looking at Timothy like, this is a representation of my failure, or this child should never have been, because he's disabled, because he's broken, because he needs too much of my help. So yeah, and it extends to marriage too, and especially like during divorce. So you often see this with Virgo fathers that are divorced or things didn't work out with the mother, the ones that are on the dark side, where they'll take it out on the children. And taking it out on the children can be as simple as not coming around and spend time with the children, being very sparse with child support, or dragging your feet about child support, or trying to get out of paying child support, making it difficult when it comes to visitation and all that types of stuff. So because things didn't work out between Shanda and the father of her children, she didn't even want the children. She's like, throw it all away. Oh, me and him didn't work out? Well, you can have these children too. I don't want none of it because it doesn't fit into my whole ideal of how life should be. We were supposed to stay together. So since we didn't, the children are going to suffer along with you, that type of stuff. I want no parts of this because it's broken. It's tainted. And remember, Virgo is also the sign of purity. So yeah, you got to really look at that sometimes, like literally in terms of how some Virgo people could look at things. Neglecting duties as a mother. So that moon in Virgo is representing her duties as a mother. And with that moon conjoined to the North Node, it's basically showing that this was a new experience for her in this lifetime. And with it opposing the sun, that's like she ain't trying to be down with this experience. She don't want it. She don't want to have to deal with children day in and day out and have to deal with the whole routine and all this type of stuff dealing with children. She wished she could wish those children away. That's how this opposition is basically dealing. A child suffers from malnutrition as a result of neglect. So Virgo is the sign of nutrition. So we're going to see some strong Virgo themes coming up throughout this reading, because that's a big deal when it comes to nutrition. So Virgo rules nutrition, moon in Virgo, that's showing that, you know, as a mom, that's a major theme with her. And then with the opposition, that's basically showing neglect that involves nutrition. Also, Virgo rules hygiene. So Timothy's hygiene was lacking as well. Also, constantly monitoring Timothy on camera while at work. So Virgo is the sign of the monitor. Virgo is about monitoring. So the Pisces energy is dealing with the camera, with the sun in Pisces conjoined to the South Node. That's Timothy always being on camera, opposing that North Node and moon in Virgo. Even some of her coworkers said that she was always on her phone looking at some webcam shit. And that was basically her looking at the cameras in the house to make sure Timothy wasn't doing anything he wasn't supposed to be doing. So she was very neurotic, which is that moon in Virgo. She was a worrywart, which is that moon in Virgo. And just the whole constant monitoring, constant checkups, that's very moon in Virgo as well. And she harshly criticized him as well to the point of humiliation, which is represented by this opposition. At one point, she called him a dummy because I think I have the quote in here because of the way he was breathing. And she said something like, see, you don't have to breathe with your mouth open, dummy. So she would say stuff like, you're so dumb and stuff like that. And that can be a dark-sided trait of Virgo, to really want to lay into someone with that vitriol, with the hateful words, words of disgust. Enlisting the help of Paul. So in this case, we have to look at that sun as representing Paul. Being a service dog trainer. So she was also a service dog trainer. And if you ask me, she kind of looked like a dog in the face. But yeah, so the dogs are represented by the Virgo. And then her training these dogs for people who are disabled, that's the Pisces in. And then she claimed she needed a service dog too to monitor. This is the crazy part about this bitch, y'all. She was all concerned about her own nutrition, her own, and this is what I mean about Pisces, how they could be totally in that fishbowl existence where people on the outside don't even matter. And she could totally like act like they don't exist. So she was so concerned about her own health because she claimed she was hypoglycemic. So, she would talk about how she had to eat at a certain time and stuff, and that she even had a service dog that could sniff out when her blood sugar was low and shit like that. This bitch was something else. Moon and North Node in Virgo, square Neptune and Sagittarius. So we're dealing with a T-square here. Let me go back to her chart. So we're dealing with a T-square aspect pattern, which basically is telling the story of the severe neglect of Timothy and also the conditions of her home and how she was neglectful as a mother. So Sun and South Node squaring Neptune, and then you also have the Moon and North Node squaring Neptune. That's some heavy energy dealing with neglect, dealing with lies, dealing with malnutrition. So Moon and North Node in Virgo squaring Neptune and Sagittarius. Now remember, with the North Node in Virgo, in this lifetime, you're supposed to go on the straight and narrow. You're supposed to try to do the right thing. Now you are supposed to be very much about work. And she did get that part right. She was working all the time, but work also extends to the home, like housework. So she wasn't keeping up with the housework because one of the cops was like, why is your house so messy? She wasn't doing her motherly duties, represented by Moon in Virgo. She was just a hot mess. So this is showing her making up stories about Timothy and all that type of stuff, especially when she was talking to the cops. Allowing law school, again, that's represented by Neptune and Sagittarius, allowing law school to trump her duties as a mother. Being a neglectful mother, wanting to escape her duties as a mother. Also, her claims of disassociating, hence her lack of memory. So when she was on the stand during the trial, when the prosecutor was asking her all these questions, she kept on saying, I don't remember, I don't remember. And then she even claimed that she would dissociate, and that's why she didn't remember a lot of stuff. Well, these squares could deal with where a person dissociates, where they do have lapses of memory. But this can also be somebody that has a selective memory, that they choose not to remember details of certain things, because if they did remember it, then the guilt would set in, right? So it's best to just block it all out and act like it's not happening, unless you have to deal with it at that point in time. And that's one of the reasons too why she was saying, oh yeah, when it came to bathing Timothy, I wouldn't look. Yeah, you're not looking because he's skin and bones. because to really look at him, that guilt could be overwhelming. So again, this is representing her messy home. So people that got Moon square Neptune could have a messy home. Her claims of hypoglycemia and her use of a service dog for that reason. It says here, data obtained by 13 on your side shows Shanda Vander Ark, also known as Shanda Ferguson, had 18 different addresses between Oklahoma and Virginia before settling into this quiet stretch of Norton Shores. So this right here, the fact that she moved around a lot, that's very much Moon square Neptune as well. Not settling down, you basically being a drifter or a transient. She's the type of person where if she didn't get locked up, she might have ended up homeless, y'all. Because this is a square that can also play out as homelessness, especially when the moon is in Virgo. That Virgo moon can manifest as homelessness. So if she wasn't going to let's say she didn't do this to her son and, she just lived her life, became a lawyer, all that, she could have been one of those smart people on the street talking to herself with a shopping cart and with a dirty, flea-infested, lice-infested blanket, acting a fool. But yeah, but she'll probably go crazy in prison because somebody with a Virgo moon and it's square in Neptune and Sagittarius, a lot of times they're not going to handle prison very well. Now, near the family's home on Matthews, this square also deals with the fact that she didn't show back up to court for her I think she had to show up for the sentencing, but it was like the final day of the trial she chose not to show up because she claimed she got sick. And again, it's that guilt that was setting in. Now, you got some people that will do things and they really don't have a conscience about it, but I feel because of what's in Shanda's chart that she did have some degree of guilt. Like sometimes the guilt would creep up if she really came out of that fishbowl existence and really realized what she was doing. But you see, she got Mercury in Aries, which can cause her to be very selfish in terms of her mindset, where it's all about her. She's self-absorbed. So the sun is South Node in Pisces, quincunx Pluto in Libra. So her attempts to avoid dealing with Timothy, because this quincunx involving Pluto can manifest as avoidance. Like you're trying to avoid dealing with this person as much as possible. Torturing Timothy. So this is basically dealing with chronic abuse, chronic torture. And you could look at this aspect as a slow kill aspect. Sometimes quincunxes can manifest as death. So in this case, it would be death through neglect. Her obsession with becoming an attorney, which is represented by Pluto and Libra, trumps her need to care for Timothy. Also, this can play out as projection. Remember what I said about people with strong Virgo energy, which would include Virgo moons. Like if the marriage doesn't work out, if the relationship doesn't work out and they have kids, they could end up taking it out on the kids. So this could have been a case of projection where she's harboring resentment towards Timothy's father and she takes it out on Timothy. Lying under oath, playing dumb with the prosecutor, vomiting. So this is the situation where she sees the photo of Timothy, which is represented by the sun and South Node in Pisces. And then she acts like she's going to vomit, which is represented by Pluto in Libra. Vomiting on the stand. That's basically Pluto in Libra. Libra is the stand and Pluto is vomit. So, quote unquote, vomiting on the stand when shown photos of Timothy. Now, I do believe she was faking with the vomiting, but I also believe that she was affected by seeing that picture. Again, she's the type that she can go on with her evilness as long as she's living in that fishbowl existence. But at this point in time, because remember, Pluto and Libra is also representing the prosecutor. Once he showed those pictures to her, it's like now you can't deny it. It's staring you in the face. And now you know you're on the edge where your freedom is about to be taken from you. So it may not have even been like, what have I done, like with Timothy, more so what have I done to put myself in this situation where I'm about to get locked up? Because again, I do feel like she really did not care about any of her children, especially Timothy, though, because he had the most disabilities. So here she is acting like she's vomiting on the stand. But I do believe that some of this reaction was real simply because she's being forced to face the reality of what she's done. But again, it could be she's feeling bad for herself because she realizes her life is over. Mind you, with that Pisces energy, Pisces, like I said before, produces that merging effect where there's no individual self, right? So with her sun being conjoined to that South Node, that can cause her to look at her children as simply just versions of her own self. So if you don't like a certain aspect of yourself, right? If you're trying to, do better, if you're trying to get somewhere in life, but this one aspect of yourself is holding you back, what would you do? You would try to either minimize that part of yourself or transform it or get rid of it or what have you. So she's looking at her children as just basically, they're not even real people. They're not even their own individuals. Hence the way she was treating Paul as well. Yes, Avis. And Pisces is famous for self-pity, for feeling sorry for themselves. Telling you, that Pisces stellium is no joke, especially because both the sun and Mars are involved. So Sun and South Node in Pisces trine Uranus and Scorpio. So this aspect is representing some of her strengths, some of what comes easy to her, some of what could make her life easy. So this can represent benefits she received for Timothy. Now, she could have received benefits at some point, but I don't believe she was receiving them at the time he died, though, because she wasn't supposed to have custody of him anyway. But it could have been a time prior that she was receiving benefits. And she might have even been receiving benefits for the younger child, because she also had a younger child. Because she seemed like the type that would milk the system like that. Having a child, Paul in this case, who becomes her enforcer and ally in the torture. Sun in Pisces trine Jupiter in Cancer. So this is the aspect where I feel like this is what caused her to score high on the bar exam. So this can produce a photographic memory. So photographic memory helps her to earn high marks in law school and high marks on the bar exam. Or because aspects can manifest in different ways, or she could have cheated with the help of someone on the inside. So just so happens that her father-in-law is an attorney. Trust and believe somebody with that heavy Pisces energy opposing that Virgo energy, a lot of times they will cheat. And she has a cheating aspect in her chart, like where she could cheat on a test. Mars opposition Saturn. So here it is right here. She got Mars opposition Saturn. So when I was looking at that, I was like, yo, excuse me, she could have cheated. Maybe not on the bar exam, but she could have cheated on the test or other tests prior. She could have cheated with the bar exam, not in terms of actually having like all the answers, but she could have had a copy of a bar exam test. So she knew exactly like what the answers were for that version or something, but I wouldn't put it past her. So Mars in Pisces, opposition, Saturn in Virgo, refusing to accept responsibility. with Mars and Pisces, it's easy to shift responsibility onto others. And this opposition is basically showing that refusing to accept responsibility, this can also be a refusal to help. Deflecting blame, neglecting her duties, feigning ignorance when being questioned by the police. So the police are represented by Saturn and Virgo. And when they were questioning her, she was acting like she didn't know that he was that bad off, and, just acting like she was just so surprised. And I can't believe he would do that. Looking old before her time. Mars can represent how you look in terms of your face. It can represent your facial features. It can represent your facial expressions. So when someone has Mars opposition Saturn, they could look a little old in the face. And with Saturn and Virgo, that's what gives her that bulldog look. And in some cases, Saturn can manifest as ugliness. I just got to keep it real. Lacking compassion, sensitivity, empathy, and sympathy. So let's say she had Mars and Pisces alone without this opposition to Saturn. This could cause her to be very compassionate, to be empathic, to be sensitive to the suffering of others. But because it's opposing the Saturn and Virgo, and remember what I told y'all about Virgo. Virgo is a sign about things that are supposed to operate as they should, things that are supposed to be perfect, or if they're not perfect, they need to be at least in well working condition, or there's going to be a problem. So that takes away from her sensitivity towards people with disabilities. So even though, and this is the irony too, because she was training those service dogs, which this is another aspect that deals with her training the service dog. So you're training service dogs, but you really don't have compassion towards people who are disabled, the ones who need those service dogs. Now, you could look at oppositions as this or that. Sometimes you'll be more so on one end than the other. So you could also look at this as her basically being more about dogs than people. And also her being a service dog trainer, it could have been for her own self-glorification, not really to help out people that are in need of service dogs. Monitoring Timothy, because remember I said Virgo is the sign of the monitor. Monitoring Timothy on camera while she was at work. And she even attached motion sensors on Timothy. So that deals with that. Preventing Timothy from sleeping. Forcing him to spend hours in the bathtub. Because remember I said when you see this Pisces pop up, one of the meanings will be the bathtub, the baths that he had to take. So there will be times where he had to spend hours, and Saturn represents time. He would have to spend hours in the bathtub. Mind you, this is when he was so weak that he couldn't walk on his own. So it's not like Timothy, because it got to a point of no return. It's not like Timothy could have ran away from home because he was, being abused and tortured like this. It got to a point where he was so incapacitated, he couldn't even walk on his own. And remember, I said this can cause her to be prone to cheat on tests. This Mars opposition Saturn can play out like it is like slave master aspect. So this is what I mean about that Mars opposition Saturn in Virgo producing that bulldog look. She looked like an English bulldog. No, I wouldn't go that far. I'll say she looks like a Frenchie. She looked like a French bulldog. No, she looked like a French English bulldog mix. I'll say that. But yeah, look at her. Like she looks ran through, worn down, just all hit up in the face. And she doesn't look like a nice person. Roma said, Jesus, that face says it all right. It does. We should just call her Mad Dog. That's Mad Dog right there. That's probably the first tat she going to get in prison. It's going to say Mad Dog. You know what? I wouldn't even be surprised. She's probably the type 2 that's into that zoophilia. You know what I'm talking about. More people than you think are into that stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if, she had a little rendezvous with a couple of them dogs. She looked like the type. I mean, come on, somebody that's going to treat their child like that, they're capable of anything. Mad Dog 2020, that's what I'm talking about, Sacred Owl. Now, she has Venus at the 11th degree of Aquarius and is squaring Chiron in Taurus. One thing about Aquarius, where you got to take literally sometimes, is Aquarius is that cold sign. Aquarius rules things that are frozen. Aquarius rules refrigeration. So keep that in mind as I go through these aspects involving her Venus in Aquarius. So with this Venus in Aquarius square Chiron and Taurus, this can manifest as a weird association with food and where she could be a dictator when it comes to food. Now, this is representing her claims that Timothy was on a food strike. So this square alone helps her to come up with that lie. It's representing the frozen foods theme. So one time Shanda tells the story that Timothy snuck into the freezer because she would keep the freezer locked. She kept the freezer, the refrigerator, and the cabinets locked so that Timothy couldn't have access to food whenever he wanted it. And there was a couple of times where she told Paul, the oldest, to dangle frozen chicken nuggets in front of him as a way to get him to either behave. Oh no, this is when Timothy was unconscious, or he was like barely conscious, and she told Paul to wave a frozen chicken nugget in front of his face. But there was another time when Paul took some frozen chicken and was eating it because he was starving at that time. So the frozen foods theme is coming through this square. It says on the stand, Vander Ark also claimed not to remember texting Paul the day before Timothy's death, instructing him to possibly feed Timothy frozen pizza rolls. Tell him if he actually sits up by himself and stays sitting up, he'll get some pizza rolls, she said. Don't tell him it's only 2. And I'm okay if they are frozen rather than cooked. Also, the Virgo is representing the instructions that she's given Paul. So again, remember, she's dealing with that opposition between her Virgo stellium and the Pisces stellium. The Virgo part is her instructing Paul to do all this stuff. I forgot to mention that part. So Venus square Chiron, just in general, can produce weird food combinations. So basically, at some point, they were only feeding Timothy bread. And when Timothy would get out of line, according to them, they would put hot sauce on the bread and make him eat bread soaked in this hot sauce. And it wasn't just Tabasco sauce. It wasn't the Carolina sauce. It wasn't the Frank's Red hot sauce. It was like some super hot sauce that you could only find online. That, you never even heard of the name, but it says something like the devil's asshole or something like that, that type of hot sauce. Also with this square, this can show that she doesn't like to share. So the fact that she kept the food locked up, the fact that, the boys coming back to live with her, she had a serious problem with that because that meant she had to spend more money and that she had to share what she had. Also, this represents sudden changes in her financial situation. Again, one of the sudden changes took place once the 2 boys came to live with her, and now she's responsible for their care. Now, Paul had a job, but, Timothy couldn't work. So she's on the hook now for the finances. Also, this can show non-compliance, like non-compliance with the court or what she's supposed to be doing. And this can show that she could have sociopathic tendencies. And shocking people. Like just the way she was dealing with the food and situation like that, that basically shows that people were shocked at her behavior and at some of her decision making. That Venus is at the 11th degree. The 11th degree can produce conflicts with food, conflicts with being a mother, conflicts with home, conflicts with family. You know, I bet you she's racist too. She got a racist look to her, don't she? And these criminals, they always want to put on a pair of glasses. You notice that? Once they spend time behind bars, they want to act like all of a sudden they need glasses. I'm like, you ain't fooling me, bitch. Venus in Aquarius, quincunx Saturn in Virgo. So this shows changes in her level of responsibility. Timothy's father sent him to live with Shanda. Locking the refrigerator with Saturn representing her barring access to that refrigerator. Remember I said Aquarius rules refrigeration. Braiding her hair in an attempt to look younger or innocent. But this can also represent those braids that are unkempt, because when you got Saturn and Virgo, you could have some challenges with looking groomed, with, you know, fixing yourself up, even with hygiene. So that Venus in Aquarius is representing the braids. Venus deals with style, and then Aquarius is ruling the braids. She might have Venus in Aquarius in her first house. You never know. But I don't have her birth time. Venus in Aquarius opposition Black Moon, Lilith, and Leo. This is basically representing the times where she dangled food or waved food in front of Timothy, or when she instructed Paul to do so. Tortured son murder trial, Michigan versus Shanda Vander Ark. Defendant, entire financial burden was on me. See what I mean? That's that Venus square Chiron. See, she wasn't expecting that. All right, so she got Mercury and Aries, quincunx Saturn and Virgo. And remember I said some people with Mercury and Aries can be very selfish, really only thinking about themselves. So with this quincunx, it shows that she was coming up with new discipline methods, which would include the use of the hot sauce. And she even advocated using hot sauce on Timothy's genitals. And that is when Paul did stand up to his mother and said, I'm not going to do that. But it was very much a process of trial and error with the punishment. Saturn rules punishments. So she's constantly trying to construct these new punishments for Timothy, because she claimed Timothy was very difficult. She claimed she had challenges with disciplining him. Also, this represents the panic attacks that she was having when she was questioned by the police. Also, police getting a hold of the incriminating text messages. So the text messages are represented by Mercury, because Mercury rules phones, and the police is represented by Saturn and Virgo. So they were able to really seal the case once they got a hold of those text messages between her and Paul, because that's where she was instructing Paul a lot of times, through the phone. Co-workers said that she was always on her phone at work. So that Mars opposition Saturn deals with that, but it also this quincunx as well. Mercury and Aries, quincunx Saturn and Virgo, because this is like using your phone for personal use while you're at work and trying to keep a low profile about it. But her coworker still was able to see it. Hey, Kay, I'm doing fine. Hope you are too. Now, this is one of the pictures, one of the few pictures that the prosecutor showed Shanda and also showed the jury, I believe. But as you can see, that's Timothy right there, looking very frail, looking very thin, looking like he is on the verge of starvation. And this part was so like heart-wrenching. So you can't see the text message, but basically Paul was the one who sent his mother the text with the picture of Timothy. And he said to his mother, maybe we should feed him. So it does show you that Paul did have some level of sympathy and compassion towards Timothy, which you'll see when I talk about their sinistry. But yeah, he sent his mom a text and was like, maybe we should feed him. And that's when I think she was like, okay, feed him a couple of chicken nuggets. Jupiter at the 29th degree of Cancer. So her Jupiter's in Cancer at the 29th degree, and that 29 can produce high pressure situations involving home, family, motherhood, and also food. Also, this represents her claims of being hypoglycemic. So I would say the claims are confirmed with Jupiter at the 29th degree of Cancer. But again, the irony is she was very concerned about her own health and cared nothing about the health of her son, Timothy. And you could tell she didn't care about Paul's health either, because Paul didn't look healthy either. Paul looked like he was half starving. Also, Jupiter at the 29th degree of Cancer points to her numerous relocations and also her being conflicted about being a mother. And this can represent a messy home as well. Torture son murder trial, Michigan versus Shanda Vander Ark. See, like it says right here, he texted her saying, he's bone thin, Mom. Maybe we need to feed him. That's a damn shame. So again, it's showing that Paul had a certain degree, the smallest degree, but he had some degree of compassion and sympathy towards his brother. So here's one of the documents I could find, and this provides the dates of birth for Shanda's children. You got Eric, born March 27th, 2000. Paul was born April 10th, 2002. Millie Joan, born June 20th, 2004. And Timothy, the one that she killed, was born on August 6th, 2006. This is basically a custody document, and it says mother's visitation rights. The mother may visit the minor children as follows. It says all children listed, and then it says supervised a set forth on attachment A. So again, remember I was saying she was basically given supervised visitation prior to this whole situation happening, years prior. Now, I don't see a date listed on this document, but it's just showing that. So it says that the recipient of the text was an older son, Paul Ferguson, then 19, charged with first-degree child abuse in an ongoing case stemming from Timothy's death. He testified against his mother. He described the situation as being like Stockholm Syndrome. So Paul is quoted as saying, I desire to find a role model that, due to my own low self-esteem, I would do anything to make them proud of me, he reportedly said. That's not an excuse. I know, but I feel like I'm glad I was at least able to realize it so I could correct it. Paul told the jury that he had abused his brother at his mother's instruction, while Vander Ark said that the abuse was done by Paul and blamed him for the severe forms of discipline she used. So let's get into Paul's chart. So here's Paul's chart right here. He was born April 10th, 2002, and that 10 does deal with children. It can deal with being moved around as well. And he has Neptune at the 10th degree. Neptune is the planet of neglect. So that's matching up with his birth number. As you can see, he has Sun conjunct Mercury in Aries. Mercury represents siblings. So this Mercury is representing Timothy, his brother. He has North Node in Gemini, Saturn in Gemini. Gemini rules siblings. And with that North Node in Gemini can bring special circumstances, hard lessons, Serious challenges with a sibling or siblings. Sun conjunct Mercury in Aries. Being the boss of his brother Timothy. Anger and aggression directed toward brother. But we can also look at that as anger and aggression directed towards his father as well. ADHD symptoms. So he mentioned to the police that he was diagnosed with ADHD, and this conjunction basically proves it. Sun and Mercury at Aries semi-square Saturn and Gemini. Coming up with new punishments for Timothy. Challenges with expressing his individuality when around his father. Being responsible for his brother Timothy took away from his free will, his ability to do what he wanted to do. Venus and Taurus square Neptune in Aquarius. Now, Timothy, during the investigation, said that he had sensory processing disorder and also some other disorder called attachment something disorder. And both of those disorders deal with this square right here. And this square could play out as someone who is autistic or where they are displaying some of the traits of autism. And I do think Paul is on the spectrum. Also, this is the Stockholm syndrome that we speak of, that he spoke of, in terms of his excuse why he didn't go get help for his brother when his mother was starving and torturing him. This shows that Paul can be cold and numb towards others. And it shows abandonment issues that would spill over into his relationships with other people. Very low, but also malleable self-esteem. So his mother took advantage of this square by being able to control his level of self-esteem. Denying someone food. Food being locked up. So this square is representing the fact that Shanda had the food locked up in that house. Mars in Taurus square Uranus in Aquarius. This can produce sociopathic tendencies. Basically, it can also produce someone where it's like you're not sure who the hell you're dealing with. They can switch up. It's another aspect that can produce autistic symptoms, especially with Mars being in Taurus, because Taurus deals with sensory and senses and sound and all that type of stuff. And a person with Mars and Taurus, they could be very sensitive to noises, period, and sensitive to external stimuli. So when Mars is square in Uranus and Aquarius, oh yeah, this could be produce somebody that's easily set off by, just frequencies and signals and things like that. Actually, somebody with this square really shouldn't be around too many like high-tech stuff, but it's funny that what's his face? Paul was a serious gamer. Like that's all he wanted to do was play video games. But somebody like this is very sensitive to frequencies and signals like Wi-Fi and all that type of stuff. Very sensitive to radiation. Also, this square shows that Paul is lacking a strong sense of individuality, which means that he's going to easily be taken advantage of if he goes to prison. Somebody's going to quickly make him their bitch. Drastic changes in persona. Being indifferent towards a male's need for food. The male in this case would be Timothy. Being destructive and disruptive. Being bullied. Saturn in North Node and Gemini opposing Pluto and Sagittarius. This is basically Paul watching Timothy die. Also, it shows that he witnessed and he was involved in the abuse and torture of his brother. Also, Paul spoke of the stench that was coming off of Timothy and Timothy's living space. So the stench that enveloped the closet his brother was in. Being interrogated, giving testimony about punishment of brother in court was intimidating for him. So the Gemini is representing the testimony. Pluto and Sagittarius is representing the prosecutor in court. Mercury and Sun in Aries trine Sagittarius South Node, sextile Gemini North Node, being given the plea deal in exchange for his testimony. So in exchange for his testimony against his mother, Shanda, he was basically given a plea deal where he didn't have to face too much time, but he still had to plead guilty of child abuse. Saturn and Gemini quincunx Chiron and Capricorn, using trial and error with punishments for Timothy, participating in the starvation of Timothy with Capricorn ruling starvation, learning disability, chronic depression, his father making him get 2 jobs, Jupiter in Cancer opposition Chiron and Capricorn. Basically, this can show that he was playing God when it came to feeding Timothy. Learning of the starvation process and actually seeing it go down. Mother and father at odds, mother relocates. And he might have looked at his father as pushing his mother away, but that's probably what Shanda tried to tell Paul. She was probably like, yeah, it was all your father. He's the one that made me move away from you guys, and he made it impossible for me to be a mother to you guys and stuff like that. So idealization of mother due to being wounded by the father. Moon in Pisces, square Gemini, North Node, and Sagittarius South Node. Being abandoned by mother triggers remittance of karmic debt of Sagittarius South Node, judgment, and hard lessons of the Gemini North Node, having a mind of his own. So he's lacking judgment, and he's lacking him having a mind of his own due to his mother's influence. So this square is pointing to this. And you could say that Moon in Pisces is fear that his mother is going to abandon him again. Shanda neglecting his brother Timothy results in a conflict of his morals and ethics. Because when you got a Sagittarius South Node, you come into this lifetime having morals and ethics. You just naturally know right and wrong for the most part. So Paul knew what him and his mother were doing was wrong. He knew it. The times when he questioned his mother's schemes, lacking freedom due to mother having cameras everywhere. And that Moon in Pisces is representing the cameras that his mother set up, cameras all in the house. Mother's victim role playing, represented by the Moon in Pisces, makes Timothy basically a mute. No, not Timothy, my bad. Makes Paul basically a mute, where he doesn't speak his mind or voice his opinions. So that was a mistake. That should be Paul, not Timothy. So Paul has Mars conjunct Algol, and Algol is a star of violence, wickedness, depravity. It's basically known as the demon star, and it can play out as evil deeds. So the fact that he has Mars conjunct Algol makes a lot of sense. You never know, he could be dealing with some demonic possession. Mars parallels Ozma, depression, loss in childhood, feels restricted, fearful, unhappy. Mercury conjunct Curta, severe wounds inflicted upon brother, putting brother through cruel trials. Because remember, Mercury rules siblings. So this is representing his brother Timothy. Jupiter parallel Hamal. Hamal can play out as violence, cruelty, brutality, and within the home, and involving eating. Saturn conjunct Tabit and Gemini. Inconstancy, arrogance, violence. He was probably arrogant towards Timothy, even though he probably isn't arrogant towards anybody else. But you know, sometimes people that are beat down, they'll turn around and beat down somebody weaker than them. Impiety, danger of treachery or poison. So maybe talk of poison came up at some point, but the poison could even be seen as the hot sauce. Chiron conjunct Fasces. Fasces is a star that can play out as a violent death. And I would say that, pertains to Timothy, even though he wasn't killed through violence. The torture he experienced was pretty violent. Violent death, sickness, accidents, broken limbs. Again, they said that the medical examiner said that Timothy didn't have most of his ligaments. Can you believe that? If you don't have your ligaments, you basically can't move. So this broken limbs deals with that. Cold, detached, combative. Mercury conjunct Hera. So again, Mercury rules siblings, and Hera can deal with revenge. It can also deal with where one is keeping score. So he could have been keeping score when it came to living with his dad, him and Timothy. Maybe he felt like Timothy was more loved by his father than he was. But this can show that Paul was either jealous or where he was taking revenge upon his brother Timothy. South Node parallel Bacchus, addictive tendencies. And it was said that Paul was addicted to video games. Mercury parallel Cupido. Now, this was another thing that came up about their background. And I didn't get much information, much details about this, but at one time it was said that Paul was accused of sexually abusing one of his younger siblings. So this aspect can deal with that. And then his quote where he said, "I guess I didn't love him enough," when the cop was asking him, like, why didn't you do something? No, I think it was the prosecutor, or maybe it was the defense attorney. I can't remember. But he was asked, why didn't you, if you loved your brother, why didn't you help to save him? And he said, I guess I didn't love him enough. And that could be seen through this aspect. Mercury parallel Hygeia, the health and hygiene of Timothy being a major theme. With, again, Mercury ruling the brother. Sun conjunct Eris. Eris can deal with experiencing strife, discord, and wrath from the father. Venus conjunct Phaethon. Deadly consequences involving food. And again, remember, he sent the mom the text like, Mom, he's bone thin. I think we need to feed him. Phaethon can deal with where danger is afoot and where your actions can result in disastrous consequences, including death. Venus opposition Terpsichore. Issue with the movement of his neck, mouth, body, language expert. So if you look at Paul's neck, he got a long, thick neck, and he tends to sit slumped forward. And even his mouth looks a little janky too. So when I see that, I'm like, yeah, that's dealing with his mouth. But also, there's a few videos out there where you got some body language experts analyzing his movements and stuff on YouTube. So that can deal with a body language expert that's analyzing him. Moon contraparallel nemesis. This represents Shanda. She's represented by the moon being the main culprit. Nemesis is an asteroid that deals with where you place blame. And Shanda being on trial. Pluto opposition Vesta and Gemini, being the guardian over Timothy while Shanda was at work, because Vesta rules guardians. North Node conjunct Shiva and Siwa. Paul said his brother was destructive, which would be the Shiva part. And seeing his brother being drained of life, because Siwa can deal with, life and one's ability to thrive. All right, real quick, let's go through the synastry between Paul and his mother, Shanda. I'm going to go kind of fast because I'm running out of time. So Shanda's sun is conjoined to Paul's moon and Black Moon Lilith in Pisces. This is that merging effect that I speak of, where Paul really didn't have, his own, he couldn't really operate on his own when dealing with Shanda. So it was very easy to get Paul to sympathize with her because he already had that sympathy towards his mother with his moon in Pisces. So she milked that. The two being merged into one force. Abandonment and neglect themes are reinforced. Also, she brought out Paul's shadow side, represented by that Black moon in Pisces, part of which is being numb. Shanda's Venus conjoined to Paul's Neptune in Aquarius. Paul was very devoted to Shanda. And again, it could have been his fear of being abandoned by her again. Shanda relied on Paul to keep the refrigerator locked. The frozen food theme reinforced. Paul may have felt that Shanda rescued him from his father in particular. Also, this is Shanda's enslavement of Paul. Shanda's Neptune conjunct Paul's Pluto and South Node. Shanda's ability to make Paul feel indebted to her. So she's like, you owe me this. I rescued you from your father. Hey, Renee. Paul easily became Shanda's enforcer as a result. Also, this can represent a past life connection that could have involved a secret murder plot. Shanda's Chiron conjunct Paul's Venus and Taurus. The food theme, represented by Taurus and Venus, especially in terms of the strange meals. The strange is coming from Chiron. Shanda damaged Paul's self-esteem and sense of security, getting custody of Paul under exceptional circumstances. In terms of the squares, Shanda's Saturn and Virgo squaring Paul's Saturn and Gemini. Basically, this shows Shanda's harsh criticism would cause Paul to go silent or censor himself. Sometimes Paul would go against Shanda's instructions, or at least question them. Because with that Saturn and Gemini, you could be questioning a lot. Paul would sometimes question Shanda's discipline/punishment plans for Timothy. The constant monitoring made Paul nervous and anxious. Shanda's Neptune squaring Paul's moon in Pisces. Shanda abandoning and neglecting Paul. Shanda would make Paul feel guilty. Shanda would humiliate Paul. Shanda may have threatened to abandon Paul again. Shanda lying on Paul in court. So there was times when she was on the stand that she tried to blame some of the situation on Paul. Shanda's Sun and South Node in Pisces squaring Paul's Pluto and South Node in Sagittarius. Abandonment triggers hatred and resentment toward Shanda. So Paul claimed that, he loves his mother and all that, but I don't believe that's true. It's more, again, dependency. And it's more about, you saved me from my father type of thing. But this shows that really, there's a lot of hatred and resentment there. Paul being trapped, enslaved, and gaslighted by Shanda. The cameras took away from Paul's freedom. Shanda being numb to Paul's emotional turmoil and him dealing with this ethical and moral dilemma. Shanda's Sun and South Node in Pisces squared Paul's Saturn and North Node in Gemini. Paul witnessing and participating in the neglect of his brother. Paul was afraid of being abandoned by Shanda again. So he ended up basically towing the line. Shanda gaslighting Paul. Shanda lying on Paul, shifting blame onto him. Shanda's moon in Virgo squaring Paul's North Node and South Node. Shanda's need for help with his brother took away from his freedom. Shanda's constant criticism and correction of his brother. Shanda being a killjoy in Paul's life. Shanda made it hard for Paul to communicate effectively due to her constant corrections and criticism. Represents the time Shanda was living in a different state than him and his siblings. Let me go back to this square real quick, just to explain to you how it could play out. So about the criticism and correction, with Paul's North Node in Gemini, in this lifetime, he has to learn how to communicate. He has to learn how to speak his mind, develop a mind of his own, and he has to be very okay with asking questions. So with the North Node in Gemini, he already could be dealing with some issues with communicating effectively. So you could just imagine where her moon in Virgo, her criticizing him and saying stuff like, that's not how you pronounce it. Why you say it like that? No. Oh, you don't know that. Oh, you're not too smart, are you? Just talking like that. And then that can make somebody not want to talk. So he's not fulfilling his purpose through that North Node in Gemini by being able to communicate effectively with her constantly criticizing him and making him feel like an idiot. Shanda's Mars and Pisces square Paul, Saturn, and Gemini. Shanda's neglect of his brother Timothy, with Saturn and Gemini representing the brother Timothy. Shanda pushing blame onto Paul for some of the punishments. represents the times when Paul pushed back / refused out of concern for Timothy. Shanda's Mars and Pisces square Paul's Pluto and Sagittarius. Shanda's twisted actions and neglectful ways had Paul torn about the ethics and morals of the situation. Paul exposing Shanda's lies in court. Paul's guilty plea bargain helped to incarcerate Shanda. Shanda's Jupiter in Cancer square Paul's Mercury in Aries. Her use of emotional blackmail tactics, such as crying and saying, you don't love me, and, I did this for you. Why can't you do this for me? Whenever he would try to push back. Shanda's Neptune trine Paul's Sun and Mercury in Aries. Paul may have viewed Shanda as his savior and rescuer from his father. Because remember, Paul said his father was abusive. Shanda found it easy to brainwash Paul. And that could have been lies she told about Paul's father to get him on her side. Shanda's Saturn in Virgo, sesqui square Paul's Mercury in Aries. Paul texting Shanda about Timothy. Shanda's Chiron in Taurus, sesqui square Paul's South Node in Sagittarius, semi-square Gemini North Node. The text messages between Shanda and Paul are used as damning evidence against Shanda in court. Shanda's Venus in Aquarius, quincunx Paul's Jupiter in Cancer. Shanda being detached from Paul's needs, cares, and emotional well-being. Shanda's Jupiter in Cancer, quincunx Paul's Uranus in Aquarius. Shanda's neediness made it hard for Paul to be independent or even to have friends. Paul may have tried to rebel at various times, but with her Jupiter in Cancer, she's good at the whole emotional blackmail. Now, Shanda's Saturn in Virgo, quincunx Paul's Neptune in Aquarius. Paul would sometimes secretly rebel against Shanda's punishment instructions, like the time he snuck some food to Timothy. Shanda's Uranus in Scorpio, quincunx Paul's Sun and Mercury in Aries. Shanda's attempts to wield absolute power and control over Paul's actions and mindset. She would become upset when Paul displayed any semblance of independence. Shanda's Uranus in Scorpio, quincunx Paul's Gemini North Node. Shanda's attempts to wield absolute power and control over Paul's brother Timothy. Shanda's North Node in Virgo, quincunx Paul's Sun in Aries. That's basically the same thing. I forgot to delete that part. Oppositions. Shanda's Moon in Virgo, opposition Paul's Moon in Pisces. Shanda's constant monitoring of the home via cameras. Paul could have felt inferior to Shanda's dogs even. He may have feared one or more of them. Shanda's work schedule and need for a babysitter forced Paul to sacrifice his own needs. Shanda's instructions for the baths. Shanda's Neptune in Sagittarius opposing Paul's Gemini North Node. The neglect, shaming, imprisonment, isolation, ridicule, and humiliation of Paul's brother. Paul lacking a mindset of his own, having that Stockholm syndrome that resurfaces. Paul's testimony against her in court. Shanda's Pluto in Libra opposing Paul's Sun and Mercury in Aries. Paul being discarded by Shanda for most of his childhood. Paul being pulled back into Shanda's life due to his father's frustration. This is the opposite. This right here, you remember I was talking about Pluto and being swallowed up? This is where Shanda was swallowing Paul up. Shanda's ability to wield control over Paul's mind, threats, and intimidation. He could think on his own once he was separated from Shanda, resulting in him being a win for the prosecution. Paul's testimony that incriminated Shanda. Shanda exposing Paul to sexual material, corrupting him. So that came out too in the case that when Paul was younger, Shanda had showed him a porno or something when he was a kid. But I don't have all the details about that, but that could deal with that opposition. All right, let's get into Timothy's chart real quick. As you can see, Timothy is a Leo, born August 6, 2006. He has Sun conjunct Saturn, both at the 14th degree, which is very telling. Mercury conjunct Venus in Cancer, also very telling. Mars in Virgo, Black Moon Lilith in Virgo, South Node in Virgo. Isn't it interesting that him and his mom have inverse nodes? So Shanda has a Pisces South Node, but Timothy has a Pisces North Node. Shanda has Mars in Pisces, but Timothy has Mars in Virgo, and they're opposing each other. Jupiter going wild said, I need a spiritual bath. It said Timothy's body shows signs of malnutrition and hypothermia, according to information revealed in court, alleged by investigators to have been caused by ice baths and deprivation of food. On the rare occasion Hilson said the victim had been given food, investigators revealed it was a diet that consisted mostly of bread or bread soaked in hot sauce. And again, like I said, it wasn't your average hot sauce. This was some shit that you could only buy online. She had to order it from Amazon.com, and it was the type of hot sauce that would light your ass up. So this just shows that she was straight up sadistic. Very thin, bones protruding, Hoaxima said. In particular, he wasn't wearing any pants, so I could see his hip bones and his knee joint very prominently displayed as she positioned him in front of the camera. I could hear Miss Vander Ark tell Timothy he is pathetic, then say, but I already knew that. When she drags him in, and she also makes a comment about him owing her the biggest apology in the world, Hoaxima said. Dr. Joyce DeYoung, the Muskegon County medical examiner, testified that when Timothy died, he had a low body weight and was extremely emaciated. He was 68 inches tall and 69 pounds at the time of his death. He had no body fat and few ligaments attached. Dr. DeYoung described his body as breaking down. DeYoung said Timothy's cause of death was dehydration and malnutrition, and hypothermia was present as well. The manner of death was homicide. So Timothy had his Sun and Saturn at the 14th degree of Leo. And that 14th degree can deal with challenges with movement. So like it said in the prior slide, most of his ligaments were detached. So of course that's going to produce a challenge with movement. At some point he couldn't even walk. And then at the point where also considering the fact that his mother kept him in prison, would put shackles around his ankles at times. That's that 14th degree too. And then the motion sensors. That's the 14th degree. When you have Sun conjunct Saturn, you may not have much free will at all. So this can show also that his heart gave out, an inability to thrive, severe limitations and restrictions. That's what Saturn can place upon someone when it's conjoined to the Sun, and especially so close like that. Discipline. So the theme of discipline is their creative punishments. The father theme is strong too. So remember I was saying that Paul could have been jealous of Timothy because maybe Timothy was shown more love from his father. That Sun conjunct Saturn and Leo can be a testament of that. But from Paul's testimony or from the investigation, I think Timothy was being abused as well. But you know, if one kid's being abused less than the other kid, the kid that's being abused more might look at the other kid as being favored. Sun and Saturn and Leo opposing Neptune in Aquarius. This right here is about Timothy being locked up, trapped, isolated, being humiliated, being treated like an object, which is what that Aquarius is doing. Life force is severely weakened. Losing the will to live. A lot of people that have Sun opposition Neptune have very little will to live. Some of them will commit suicide. Some of them might have a lifetime of drug use or alcoholism. Some of them might be in prison for most of their life. Some of them might be locked up or neglected, just like how Timothy was. But this, like Neptune, when it's opposing the sun, it does not produce a strong will and it doesn't produce a strong sense of self. Free will is virtually non-existent. Being forced to sit in ice bath, and in some cases, sun opposition Neptune can deal with being disabled and it can deal with being like very sick. So in his case, he was very disabled and very sick, which led to his death. Being forced to sit in ice baths. Neptune in Aquarius is representing the ice baths. Being constantly on camera with Neptune representing the camera. And with Neptune in Aquarius, that's a network of cameras. So Shanda did have a network of cameras all around the house. Saturn, Sun and Saturn in Leo square Jupiter in Scorpio. This is showing that death was a real threat. It was an imminent threat for Timothy. He could see it coming. You know how, let's do a poll real quick. Would you rather know that your death is coming? Press 1. Or not know that death is coming? Like, if you would want death to take you by surprise, press 2. If you want to know that death is coming and you know, you may not know the exact day, but you know that you're going to die, press 1. What would you rather have? Press 1 if you know you're going to die. Press 2 if death comes as a surprise to you. And then, like, just think about the situation with Timothy, with this square. Like, it's like death is on his shoulder every day once he goes to live with his mother. So you would the ones are saying they would rather know it's coming. 2s are saying they would rather be surprised. Me, I'm kind of torn about that. On one hand, I would rather not know. And I would want it to be sudden, but not at my age now. Like if it happened when I was like 75 and it happened sudden as a surprise, I wouldn't mind because that means I've done a lot of what I needed to do. I don't want to be sick and know that death is coming and I'm like in my 70s and I'm a burden to my loved ones. But I'd rather, like at my age now, I'd rather know that death is coming so I could prepare. I could prepare my children. I could prepare just, spiritually and mentally and all that. I could, pay for my funeral and all that type of stuff. Yeah, so for me, it's about age. Once I'm in my 70s, I'm like, you could take me out. I don't care. I don't need a warning. Blazin said I want to pass in my late 80s. That's a good enough time. That's enough years to really do it all in life. I feel like I would say 80s to 90s. Like if you could live that long and your life has been pretty good, I'm like, that's basically all you need. Living to 100, that's a bit much. And I wouldn't want to be 100 and every day I wake up and be like, is this my last day? See, that's when I want to just be taken out. Like, boom, just take me out in my sleep. All right. So with the Sun and Saturn in Leo squaring Jupiter and Scorpio, so death is a real threat. It's like this big old boogie monster that's under your bed, soiling himself. So it came to a point where Timothy could no longer get up and use the bathroom, so they started to have him wear diapers. So he was soiling himself, which is what this square is representing, which really this square basically takes away from someone's dignity. So, and someone's pride. Like when you got this square, it's like you don't have no pride left, but it wasn't Timothy's fault that he didn't have any pride left. They took it away from him. Being hated. And I believe he was hated by both his mother and his brother. Free will and freedom of expression is severely curtailed. Sun and Saturn and Leo sesqui square Pisces. Hold on. Sesqui square Pisces South Node, lacking energy and vitality. Being on camera takes away from his free will. Father humiliated him. Sun in Saturn and Leo, quincunx Uranus and Pisces. Father gives up on him due to unsuccessful attempts to discipline him. Father's humiliating punishments. I forgot some of what the father would make them do, but the father was no good either. I think both of the parents sucked. Being in ice water, represented by Uranus and Pisces, affected his heart. So his heart could have been seizing up when he was dunked in the ice water. Challenges with making friends. And there was this one part where Shanda was saying that she tried to make friends for Timothy, but she knew that Timothy was not the type that could really hang with, the way she said it was very, what's the word? It was very condescending. Sun and Saturn parallel Psyche. Psyche can deal with being locked away, being confined, being wounded, and the sibling theme is strong, especially in terms of betrayal. Sun and Saturn contra parallel Bacchus. That can show, again, situations involving addiction. In this case, it could have been with the father. Sun and Saturn contra parallel Cupido. Possible sexual abuse at the hands of father or stepfather. Sun and Saturn conjunct Accubans. Domestic problems, poison, liars. Sun and Saturn conjunct Dub. Destruction, arrogance. They did say Timothy was destructive. Moon in Capricorn trine Mars in Virgo. Remember I said Capricorn is the sign of starvation. So it makes a lot of sense that Timothy's moon is in Capricorn. So with this trine, his ability to soldier on despite being starved shows that he was very capable of being self-sufficient, at least at first. So he may not have been as bad off or disabled or incapable of doing things like his mother tried to make him out to be. Basically, this shows that he knew how to behave, which is why he did well in school. So when she did have him in school, he was earning pretty decent grades. He was doing well. So this shows that he could be disciplined. He could be orderly. He could do what he's told. So I don't believe he was as bad as Shanda was trying to claim, because Shanda was basically saying that he was out of control and she couldn't discipline him. And that's why she resorted to these crazy discipline methods. Mercury conjunct Venus in Cancer. His brother Paul's close relationship with Shanda, with Cancer representing Shanda, his mother, Mercury representing his brother, and Venus, that close relationship, Venus in Cancer. Brother acts as the gatekeeper when it comes to food, constantly thinking about how he is going to eat. When you got Mercury conjunct Venus in Cancer, food could be constantly on your mind. You might, like, as soon as your stomach gets empty, you're thinking about where you're going to eat, what you're going to eat, how much it's going to cost, all that. In his case, he's thinking about food all the time because he's not getting enough of it. Now, his mind is totally possessed by his mother. Changes in family dynamic. Issues with motor skills, enunciating words, use of logic, highly irrational. All that can come with Mercury conjunct Venus in Cancer. Mercury and Venus in Cancer, quincunx Pluto in Sagittarius, being forced to sleep in the closet under the basement steps. It's that Mercury that can create small spaces. So this is showing that he was confined to a small space in the basement, with Pluto representing basement. Now he was taking short, shallow breaths through his mouth. Kind of picture how a fish out of water would breathe. And she clamps his mouth shut and tells him he doesn't need to breathe like that, and holds his mouth shut for a period of time and tells him, see, you didn't need to breathe through your mouth like that. You're a big dummy, he said. So this is basically Paul telling a story about Shanda holding Timothy's mouth closed because she didn't like the way the sound of his breathing. Mercury is representing the breathing. Shanda's influence is represented by that Cancer. And then his breath being held, that's that Pluto influence. Mercury and Venus in Cancer, semi-square Mars in Virgo. Not being able to receive help from Paul due to being so attached to Shanda. Looking for food becomes a regular challenge that is often unsuccessful. Being constantly criticized and chided by mother and brother. Because remember, with this Mercury and Venus in Cancer, he's looking at Paul and his mother as operating as one unit. Mars and Virgo opposition Uranus and Pisces. Being uncoordinated. So people that are uncoordinated, a lot of times you will see oppositions in their chart that represents that. Being monitored on camera, so that shows up again. Uranus and Pisces can represent a network of cameras. Being forced to take ice baths. Uranus and Pisces represent the ice baths. And this is showing the hypothermia. Malnutrition due to abject neglect. Now, Mars and Pisces can produce a case of issues with nutrition or even malnutrition alone, because Virgo is nutrition and Mars can produce a conflict with nutrition. It can bring a drive to basically make sure that someone is getting proper nutrition, which is what he was doing. You know, once he realized that, oh, they're not feeding me, that could send him into overdrive to try to find a way to gain those nutrients. Hollowed out abdomen. So Virgo rules the abdomen. So in that picture that I showed you where he's looking very gaunt, very thin, you could see how he has a hollowed out abdomen, and that opposition is basically pointing to that. Being shackled, cuffed around the ankles. Mars and Virgo quincunx Chiron in Aquarius. Hypothermia. Issues with coordination. Extreme shift in nutrients. Pluto in Sagittarius squaring the Virgo South Node and Pisces North Node. If you notice, they all have squares to their nodes, which can produce some serious troubling circumstances that are fated. A lot of times when you see squares to the nodes, basically the person is going to wind up in a crazy predicament. It could be something that they cause on their own, or it could be something that's happening through that planet that's square in the nodes, and that planet could be representing someone else. Like in Paul's case, Paul's moon was squaring his nodes, and that's representing his mother's influence, and especially in terms of him seeing her neglect his brother. So this is a drag me to hell configuration, this T-square. Being forced to sleep in the basement. Giving off a foul odor due to lack of hygiene and bathing. Loss of bowel functioning, had to wear a diaper. It says in the footage, Vander Ark dragged her son, who was apparently wearing an adult diaper, into the closet, according to testimony. His eyes were open, but he appeared largely unresponsive. Is Indigo in here? Indigo, somebody was asking about you the other day. Hey, Indigo. Hey, I miss you. Being neglected via malnourishment. We got to do a live stream soon and catch up on all the tea. Being neglected via malnourished, especially because, look, I'm already about to get off on a tangent now that I see Indigo up in here. Especially that situation happened like with Mike Epps and Monique. I wanted to talk about Monique briefly. Wait, why did I say not Mike? Oh yeah, the thing with Mike Epps going at it with Shannon Sharp, but then also the situation with Monique and her son. I did want to get into Monique a little bit about the son situation, because she was recently on Shannon Sharp. So I'm gonna hit you up and let you know when we could do that live stream. You've been on your other, and that's the thing, you know, I subscribe to your channel. So you got 2 channels now? Because I don't be seeing your videos come up, but that's how YouTube be doing it. They always don't be showing you what you subscribe to a lot of time. Anyway, I digress. Being neglected via malnourishment results in death. Being seriously overlooked. Lacking space and freedom due to being locked and confined to a tight space, being on camera. Malnutrition made it to where he eventually couldn't walk. Oh, we're back up on Discord too, Indigo. We would love for you to make an appearance on Discord. We're doing a watch party, Patreon. We're doing a Patreon watch party this Sunday. So anybody that would like to join my Patreon is I'll put the link in the description section after this video. South Node conjunct Terpsichore, challenges with coordination, challenges with movement. South Node conjunct Niobe, past life where a child is malnourished. So maybe he did this to a child in a past life. You never know. And that's why he's getting it in this lifetime. Now, Shanda and Timothy's chart. Oh, God, there's so much. I don't know if I'm ready for it. I might have to skip a few slides, y'all, because a lot of this stuff is redundant anyway. Because this thing is dragging. Shanda's moon conjunct Timothy's south node in Virgo. Again, remember, Virgo is about nutrition, diet. Timothy's dietary needs are reinforced through Shanda. Timothy's issues with hygiene are reinforced through Shanda. Timothy's humbling experiences are created by Shanda. So basically, this is just showing that Shanda's influence in his life, Shanda being his mother, has reinforced these Virgo themes. Shanda's sun and south node conjunct Timothy's north node in Pisces. Neglect and abandonment themes reinforced through Shanda and Paul. Imprisonment and isolation themes reinforced through Shanda and Paul. Camera theme reinforced and realized through Shanda and Paul. Humiliation theme realized through Shanda and Paul. And the reason why I keep saying and Paul is because Shanda's sun is included in this, and the sun represents children. Shanda's Venus conjunct Timothy's Neptune and Chiron in Aquarius. It was easy for Shanda to objectify Timothy due to his vulnerabilities. Timothy sneaking and eating the frozen chicken. Shanda considering Timothy to be a financial burden, a drain on her resources. Shanda's claims about her attempts to get friends for Timothy. Shanda could have been embarrassed by Timothy when in public, the time she went out in public with him. Shanda's Mars conjoined to Timothy's Uranus in Pisces, forcing him to sit in ice baths. Her humiliation tactics were amplified with Timothy. Constantly having Timothy on camera again, the cuffs, shackles around his ankles. Shanda's Jupiter conjoined to Timothy's Mercury and Venus in Cancer. Shanda playing God when it came to feeding Timothy. Pure subjectivity. Timothy was in Shanda's world. He had no separate identity in her eyes. And that's one of the dark-sided traits of Cancer. Because Cancer can produce that insular, subjective type of worldview where only your personal world matters and where the person that you're with, they basically enter your world, not the other way around. And in that manner, they basically are able to do what they want with you. Shanda's Saturn and North Node conjunct Timothy's Mars and Virgo. Shanda's punishments center on nutrition, hygiene, and stress. Shanda's Neptune conjunct, and you could also throw in criticism. Shanda's Neptune conjunct Timothy's Pluto and Sagittarius. Shanda's neglect resulted in Timothy's death. Shanda may have fantasized about Timothy's death. Shanda being imprisoned due to murdering Timothy. Shanda's Saturn in Virgo semi-squared Timothy's Mercury and Venus in Cancer. Timothy's attempts to get food would cause Shanda to come up with more punishments. Shanda's Uranus in Scorpio semi-squared Timothy's moon in Capricorn. And then where's the rest of this? So this could deal with basically her being a tyrant when it came to food, which resulted in him basically starving, her interrupting, even in times where he might have been eating something. There was a case where she claimed that, or maybe Paul said this, where Timothy went in the trash and took a half-eaten burger or something, or it was just a burger bun or something like that, and he got in trouble for trying to eat that. Shanda's moon in Virgo squared Timothy's Pluto and Sagittarius. Timothy's hatred and resentment towards Shanda. Shanda viewed Timothy as disrupting her routine. Shanda's sun in in Pisces squaring Timothy's Pluto in Sagittarius. Timothy's hatred and resentment towards Shanda. Shanda viewed Timothy, as being overwhelming, emotionally taxing, and too much to handle. And that would explain her excuse why she had him shackled up, she had him confined to the closet, and she had all the cameras on him. Shanda was disgusted by his presence. She would say that Timothy provoked her to put restraints on him and neglect him. Timothy probably tried to put up a resistance against Shanda in the beginning, and that could explain why Shanda took these extreme measures. And again, I'm not justifying it. I'm saying this is how she's seeing things. Oh, you want to go against what I said? Okay, well, I got some handcuffs for you. Shanda's Mercury and Aries squared Timothy's moon in Capricorn. Shanda being insensitive towards Timothy's hunger shows that the hot sauce was her idea, even though she blamed it on Paul. Wanting to bring pain to Timothy, and it could have been due to projecting her anger towards his father. Shanda's Venus in Aquarius squared Timothy's Jupiter in Scorpio. Matter of fact, going back to that aspect with Timothy's moon in Capricorn, because that can produce a close relationship with the father. It can even deal with living with your father. So with this square, there could have been times where Timothy's getting abused by Shanda, and he says to her, I want to go back to live with my dad, or I wish I was living back with my dad again. And that could have made her even more angrier. Shanda's Venus in Aquarius squared Timothy's Jupiter in Scorpio. Shanda was indifferent towards Timothy's torture. Shanda viewed Timothy as a huge inconvenience due to him needing a lot of support. Shanda's Uranus in Scorpio squared Timothy's Sun and Saturn in Leo and Neptune in Aquarius. This can play out as the separation that took place when he was younger from her, objectification, indifference. Shanda was a nasty bully towards Timothy, most likely due to his father. So again, the father theme is strong. Shanda was crushing Timothy's spirit, killing his spirit, and refusing to allow him to thrive and enjoy life. This is also a murder aspect and shows that it was Shanda's goal to take him out, even through avoiding or discarding him altogether. So I believe that she knew that he was eventually going to die, and she was just waiting. She was just biding her time. Shanda's Neptune and Sagittarius squared Timothy's Uranus and Pisces. Timothy's lack of friends was due to Shanda's isolation and imprisonment of him. Shanda's Neptune and Sagittarius squared Timothy's nodes. Shanda neglecting Timothy's care, including nutrition, hygiene, and doctor's visits. Shanda's neglect of Timothy in favor of her law degree. Timothy did not fit into her ideal or vision. Shanda's Pluto and Libra squared Timothy's Mercury and Venus in Cancer. Shanda banning Timothy from having access to food. Shanda's hatred and abuse of Timothy could be due to projection. Shanda's Chiron in Taurus square Mercury and Chiron in Aquarius. Shanda couldn't handle the fact that Timothy wasn't normal. Shanda's nodes squared Timothy's Pluto in Sagittarius. Shanda's actions and decisions, neglect and abandonment in this case, resulted in Timothy's death. Shanda's moon in Virgo sesqui-squared Timothy's Chiron in Aquarius. Shanda not wanting to see Timothy naked. Shanda's Venus in Aquarius sesqui-squared Timothy's South Node in Virgo. Timothy's need for help was too much of an inconvenience for her. Shanda's Mars in Pisces sesqui-squared Timothy's Mercury in Cancer. They got a lot of challenging aspects between their charts, making him sleep in that small closet, shaming and ridiculing him, severe neglect in the form of barring him access to food. Shanda's Jupiter in Cancer sesqui-squared Timothy's Uranus in Pisces. She never developed an emotional attachment to Timothy due to his special needs. And remember what I said about that Virgo moon. If the child don't turn out normal, If there's some issue, that could be a serious issue. So this is dealing with the constant monitoring of Timothy via the networks of cameras. Timothy's need for care angered Shanda. Shanda's Mercury and Aries, quincunx Timothy's Mars and Virgo. So this is like her getting mad anytime Timothy needed help with something. Shanda's Venus in Aquarius, quincunx Mars in Virgo. Shanda's indifference towards Timothy's health and nutrition. Shanda using the hunger strike excuse for Timothy's malnutrition. Let's see what else we got. Because again, like I said, a lot of this stuff is just redundant. So Shanda's Saturn in Virgo, quincunx Timothy's Chiron and Aquarius. The quincunx can deal with where you need to make adjustments. So with this, Timothy was most likely resistant to Shanda's discipline and punishment methods in the beginning, so she kept adjusting them. Because Chiron and Aquarius can cause someone to be quite rebellious. Shanda's Neptune in Sagittarius, quincunx Timothy's Venus in Cancer. Putting food under lock and key. Shanda's South Node in Pisces, quincunx Timothy, Sun and Saturn in Leo. Shanda's attempts to keep Timothy locked up, severely limiting his free will. Shanda's chronic neglect, abandonment, and humiliation of Timothy. And then we got these oppositions. So one of Shanda's punishments was to force Timothy to sit in ice bath. So that's represented by her moon and Saturn in Virgo, opposing Timothy's Uranus in Pisces. Monitoring him while she was at work via the network of cameras. Shanda's Chiron in Taurus opposing Timothy's Jupiter in Scorpio. Shanda using food to torment and taunt Timothy. Shanda considered harming Timothy by putting hot sauce on his genitals, with Scorpio ruling the genitals. And Chiron could represent a food that could wound you. And hot sauce put on the genitals could definitely wound a person. Shanda's Venus in Aquarius opposing Timothy's Sun and Saturn in Leo. Separation, severance of rights, leaving Timothy with his father. Detachment and indifference. Shanda's Mars in Pisces opposing Timothy's Mars in Virgo. Shanda neglecting Timothy's nutrition and hygiene. Shanda shifting blame onto Timothy for his malnutrition, feigning ignorance. Her claims that she would look the other way when bathing Timothy. And last but not least, we have the synastry between Timothy and his brother Paul. So just some of the pertinent aspects of the synastry. So Paul's Chiron conjoined Timothy's moon in Capricorn. This is basically Paul punishing Timothy and Paul participating in the starvation of Timothy. Paul's moon conjunct Timothy's Pisces North Node. Paul participating in Timothy's neglect. Paul showing some degree of compassion and sympathy towards him, like the time he sneaked the food for him. So again, like I was saying, Paul had a little bit of compassion and sympathy towards Timothy, and that was evident through him sneaking food for him sometimes, but not enough, not nearly enough to keep him alive. And also that text that he sent his mom when he was saying that Timothy is bone thin, we need to feed him. The camera theme is strong. Paul's South Node conjoined Timothy's Pluto and Sagittarius. The truth comes out in court regarding Timothy's death. Paul knowing that the torture of Timothy was wrong. Because again, with that Sagittarius South Node, you're coming into this current life with past life knowledge of morals and ethics. So he knew that the whole torture of his brother was wrong. He knew it. And that will probably bother him the rest of his life. The fact that he knew it was wrong and didn't do anything to try to save his brother. Paul's Sun in Aries squared Timothy's Mercury and Venus in Cancer. Paul allowing his selfish nature to ignore Timothy's request for food. So remember, Shanda has Mercury in Aries. Paul has Sun and Mercury and Aries. So it's like they're operating as one unit. They were on the same page. It was easy for Shanda to get Paul to be like her. Now, Paul was probably mad when Timothy came to live with Shanda. Paul's Venus and Taurus squared Timothy's Sun and Saturn and Leo. Paul using food as a way to get Timothy under control. Paul's peace being disturbed by Timothy's drama. Paul's moon in Pisces squared Timothy's Pluto in Sagittarius. Timothy hating and resenting Paul. Paul being disgusted by Timothy, especially his odor. So Paul mentioned that in court about Timothy smelling really bad because Timothy was soiling himself. Paul did feel guilty at times seeing Timothy being tortured and near death, because with that moon in Pisces, number one, that can produce someone who is very sensitive to the suffering of others, the suffering of living creatures, period. And it can make one very empathic. So even though Paul has some other things in his chart that can make him kind of sociopathic, this moon in Pisces could cause him to sympathize with Timothy at times, to really care about, oh, wow, he's really suffering or he's close to death. So I'm seeing this as Paul did feel guilty at times, seeing Timothy being tortured and near death. You could say there was times where Paul was scared seeing Timothy like that. Now, Paul's Saturn and Gemini square Timothy's Mars and Virgo. So this can point to him not being able to get the proper nutrition because of Paul blocking that. And also Paul's punishment of Timothy. Paul's Neptune in Aquarius squaring Timothy's Jupiter in Scorpio. Paul being numb and indifferent towards Timothy's torture until it's too late. The final ice bath that led to Timothy's death. So Paul said that he put Timothy in the bath and kept him there for 4 hours. And then when he went to check on him, he was no longer breathing. Paul's Gemini North Node squaring Timothy's Pisces North Node. Paul's Neptune in Aquarius opposing Timothy's Sun and Saturn in Leo. Paul taking part in the neglect, imprisonment, and ridicule of Timothy. And with this square right here, Paul's Gemini North Node squaring Timothy's Pisces North Node, this could deal with where he wasn't brotherly towards Timothy because he didn't really look at him like that. He just looked at him as like this helpless creature. And the thing with Gemini is, Gemini can, oh, now my nose. Gemini can basically rationalize any type of behavior. Dark side Gemini. So Paul can basically rationalize the fact that Timothy is in this weakened state, and he might even blame Timothy for being in that state. Like, well, he should have listened to mom type stuff. So Neptune in Aquarius opposing Timothy's Sun and Saturn and Leo also points to Paul putting Timothy in the ice bath. So that ice bath theme keeps resurfacing because that was a major component of the torture. So that concludes my reading about the sadistic mom, her crazy son, and her other son who didn't have a chance living with such a monster, or you could say 2 monsters, and basically the tragedy that befell him. This is just one of the worst stories I've ever heard about child neglect. And I'm so glad that Shanda was given life without parole. So there's no chance she's going to get out of prison. I hope that she suffers a great deal while she's in prison. I hope that some of her fellow inmates don't cut her any slack. I hope she gets her ass whooped. I would do it myself if I was behind bars with her. Unfortunately, I'm not. I would even take a few years extra on my sentence just to give her the business. But anyway, that's that. I hope everybody is doing well. And I think I'm gonna get out of here now because again, I still got a lot of work to do. But I do want to do another live really soon, not even really about anything in particular. Just shooting the breeze and talking about current events and stuff. And that's probably when I will ask Indigo to join me with the live. So that might be the next live stream that I do. So stay tuned for that. If you would like a reading, you could go to my website, Rahbinah.com. And if you would like to join my Patreon, I'll put the link in the description section as well. Shout out to all my patrons. Shout out to all my diggable planets. Thank y'all for holding it down. Thank y'all for y'all continued support. Shout out to all my subscribers and those who haven't subscribed, but you like to take a peek every now and then. Why don't you consider subscribing? And yeah, I think I'm out. Love you guys. Have a great evening. Peace.